Hello. Both of these are digital video cassettes. Bit of a size difference. You might be pleased to hear that's slightly higher quality, but they're both standard definition. This was used for broadcast, it's digital Betacam, and I've covered this in other videos. Now today we're going to be looking at the Sony microMV format, the smallest video cassette ever made. Now I should mention, it's not actually the smallest cassette ever made. That would go to this audio cassette from Sony again, NT format, and I mean, makes microMV look large. And this is also a helical scan video head type arrangement on here, even though it's an audio format, quite similar in that way to DAT audio. But today we're just going to be looking at this failed format. It came out around about 2001 and died around about 2006, and we'll have a look at some of the reasons it wasn't a great success. Right, let's get stuck in. Anyone who's ever done anything with video will be very familiar with mini DV, a very common format. Came out in the very late 90s and was with us, well, to some extent through to today, because that actually does go up to high definition as well in some cases. So mini DV was extremely popular, but Sony were thinking about making something even smaller. So they came up with microMV, they shrunk the tape size quite a lot, and were able therefore to make smaller camcorders. But they had several weaknesses in the design, and we can look at those. There were several models, but this seems to be much in the way the most popular, at least it is for me. So we'll look at this one today. It's the DCR IP7E, E means Europe. This is a PAL model, but it will play NTSC tapes. As well as being able to take tapes, these took these proprietary memory stick things for stills, but with 8 megabytes of storage on there. They didn't hold many photos, and certainly not very high resolution ones. But let's look at the video camera side of it. So I'll get this powered up and put a tape in and see what we can do. Looking at the connectors on the side, we have DC input. That used a connector which was common to several Sony products. An AV port, well, that also uses a non-standard connector, but it was also common to a number of Sony products, so these cables are not that hard to get. And that provides you with outputs for stereo audio, composite video, and more crucially, S-video. There's a mini USB port, really for just working with stills, I think, so not particularly useful. You can't take video from that. And then a port that looks like a FireWire port and will function with a FireWire port on computers, but it does not give you a FireWire signal. It says microMV, it's its own special format, and we'll talk about that later. They do come with a colour small viewfinder, but we're going to be using the fold-out LCD panel. Let's open it. Let's just demonstrate a cleaning cassette operation. So we'll put in one of our cleaning tapes. Now normally putting a cleaning tape, and on most formats you just have to hit play and it doesn't know it's a special tape. But this time it does know. So we step across to OK, cleaning, and it will clean for 15 seconds on its own. And it'll count down. And then it'll stop automatically. So that's better than risking over cleaning heads. I'm rewinding a tape on this one and it's clicking, and knowing Sony, that means that the supply spool gear has split. That's probably not really repairable, but it may not affect the camcorder too much. So let's demonstrate playback of a microMV tape on this camcorder. So that's eject operation. Putting the tape in is a little fiddly, but I want you to watch what happens the moment we close this. You get information on the display. It says ID 5 and you get recording date and time and how much tape has been used. And if you want to see that again, we can step through to VCR mode, sorry. And again, we can see time and date, recorded area. So maximum recording time is about 60 minutes, 62 minutes. There's no long play on these. So this particular tape is probably run for around about 58 minutes. We'll watch that one more time. The ID number, it increments that every time you put a new tape in. So even if you're not very good at numbering your tapes, the machine will number them for you, and that does come in handy. And of course it also collects the original time and date information, what dates the first and last recordings were. It does that because you see this little logo here, cassette memory. I think it's 64K of memory on the chip, on the tape. Now that's not that unusual. Lots of formats that's available on mini DV, not normally implemented, but when it is, there are contacts in here so that you can have memory that does that on mini DV, and it's available on other formats such as DVC Pro and Digital Betacam and others. Just grab a DVC Pro tape here and you can see the set of contacts there. So information can be stored on the tape. So how do we actually operate the unit? Well, you might think it's touch display as some mini DV camcorders are, but no, it's got this awful control here. You have to rock and push in the middle. So if you're using it without the remote control, it's cumbersome. You have to select the thing you want and then hit it in the middle. That's really awkward to use. And imagine we want not to have that so loud. How do we adjust the volume? Well, on something like a digital 8 camcorder, very often there's volume controls on the edge of the display, but there's not here. This is not quite the right remote control, but it's extremely similar. It should be the 817, I believe, and they've got the 814. But I think it's got exactly the same functionality. And there's no volume control on there. So to set volume, we have to step across to function, hit it in the middle, go down here to find the volume setting, hit that in the middle, step across to minus or plus, and hit it in the middle until we've got that where we wanted, and then OK, and then exit. Can you believe that that is the way that you turn the volume down on a microMV camcorder? That's really clunky, and considering how good some of the other features are, it's really surprising how poor that is. Fortunately, a lot of the controls are on the remote control, so I almost always use remote control with this format. Let's eject it. If we load in a brand new tape, you'll see that we don't get that information from the onboard chip. Nothing there because it's not been recorded. So whenever I put a tape in and I get nothing on the display like that, I know there's no point running the tape at all. There's nothing being recorded on it. Here's a tape that's been recorded for a very small amount of time. Ah, now look what I found. I found a cute little baby there. He's not a cute little baby anymore.
Hi.
So, of course, one of the key selling points of this is that it's the smallest camcorder in the world at the time, around about 2002 or 3. But also, being digital, it should be easy to connect to a computer for editing and backing up of the material. And there's a port there that looks just like a FireWire port, the same as you'd get on a mini DV camcorder. So you'd think that'll output a mini DV type signal, a DV signal, which is FireWire. You can connect to any FireWire port on the computer and off you go. And to a very limited amount that was kind of true, because you can connect that to a computer that has a FireWire port, and you could use some software that came with the camcorder called MovieShaker and pull the files off the tape digitally. However, it kind of goes downhill from there, because with the extremely small size of the tape, it wasn't possible to record onto this using the very high quality DV codec. Some people complain about DV, but usually they're Americans, because in NTSC land the DV codec has half the chroma resolution of in PAL countries. But that's beside the point. This couldn't contain such a high quality codec on such a small tape. Even with the advances of technology that allowed them to record smaller tracks on this than you have on mini DV. And one of the ways they did that was using, as I understand it, magneto-resistive head tips. The first time magneto-resistive heads have been used on a helical scan machine. Now that's the kind of head tip that's used in hard disks and on an audio format called DCC, Digital Compact Cassette, and I've done a video about that. So it was quite sophisticated, but they had to use a compression algorithm to get video onto these tapes, and it's MPEG-2, so essentially the same codec as is used on DVD and also used on some other formats such as HDV, high definition video, on mini DV tapes. But this is standard definition, MPEG-2, quite similar therefore to what you have on DVD. But everyone was happy with DVD, the quality was okay. So what's the problem? Well, of course it's compressed, so it's less suitable for editing. But also the signal that comes out of that port doesn't comply with FireWire standards. So special software would be needed to get that into a computer. And MovieShaker was the one provided by Sony, but other software did, for a short time at least, provide some compatibility with these camcorders, such as some versions of Pinnacle Studio, and there's a fair collection of pieces of software that could, to some extent or another, handle microMV connection. The files it then produces are MMV files, which are non-standard in another way, but we can tackle that later. The first thing I would like to do is see whether we can use the MovieShaker software to take the data from one of these tapes. Now that's a little tricky because it won't run on any modern operating systems, and you also have to have an old version of Apple QuickTime Player on there for some reason, no later than version 5, which actually comes bundled on the CD anyway. So I've managed to find an image of the CD for MovieShaker 3.1, which was, I think, the last version, or one of the last versions released, so it should be okay. And I'm going to load that onto a Vista laptop that I still have and still in good working order, which fortunately also has a FireWire port, and we'll see if we can connect this up and make it work. Here we are installing Sony MovieShaker 3.1. We already have QuickTime 5 and DirectX installed, so we just need to select Install MovieShaker. It asks whether we're using NTSC or PAL. This can be altered later if needed, but would have been better for one install to have handled both. It took a couple of minutes. A lot of that time was after it had displayed 100% progress. It requests a reboot to complete Real Producer installation. This seems to be some sort of video encoder software. Okay, let's attempt to capture this material from microMV. So I have a folder here where I've put the MovieShaker software. It's also got an NTSC and PAL switcher. I'd set it to PAL because the tapes I'm going to be working with are PAL. It's got some information, helps and readmes, but here's the app itself. And the camera is connected to the computer via a normal FireWire cable. Let's change the color scheme to Windows Basic. And is device connected. We have clips here and how long they are and the dates they're recorded. If I want all of those clips, I seem to make a dong every time I click on them. That's highlighted them all. They've got the orange around them. Batch capture. Do I want to capture all 19 files? Yes, please. And it will run the tape at real time, of course, and capture all those files. Right, we'll come back later when that's finished and we'll see what we have. Okay, having captured that, let's see what we have in the folder for those captures. We have lots of QuickTime files. Okay, so we have these files, but they're of the MMV format. So can I now use those with any modern software? Play back one of these files. The quality is adequate, I would say. There's quite a lot of loss of resolution here around this tree. But we'll let you have a look at some of these files in a moment. Now, what to do with these MMV files? Well, it turns out it might not be that hard, actually, to convert them to something more useful like MPEG-4. There's some software for it. There's a package called Wondershare UniConverter, which used to be called Video Converter Ultimate, which will take MMV files and convert them to something more useful like MPEG-4. We have the paid version here, since the trial version only converts 1/3 of the running time of each video clip. It doesn't officially support MMV files, but it does actually work. You can't open a file manager to select MMV files there, or not without renaming them first. Instead, use a drag and drop feature to drop them into the UniConverter. There is an option to merge all the files together, which could be useful if you don't want the tape split into all the clips. You can then convert MMV files to MPEG-4 or whatever, and there are normal sort of quality setting options as well. Now, what I've sometimes done in the past with microMV is to play the tapes via an S-Video connection to my favourite capture device, such as a Canopus ADVC55. This gives low compression DV-AVI files of 13 GB per hour, ideal for nearly all video editing software. Which begs the question, which route is better? A pure digital route which involves lossy re-encoding, or a part analog route which produces files of a known good performance? You could probably argue it both ways, but here's a short clip that I recorded back in 2006, and I've transferred it both the analog and digital route here for comparison. So I was quite impressed actually how much better the pure digital route worked, and I think I'm going to offer that as an option in future, but it'll have to cost more because there's a lot of extra work. Looking at the camera itself, it's reasonably nice to hold and use. The record button feels where it should be, over there. Something I was quite surprised with, there's the zoom control is pressure sensitive. Now personally I prefer the zoom controls to be a rocker front and back. Some Canon camcorders did that, so zoom in is kind of obviously that way. But pushing up, I think, on this takes us to zoom in, and you can do it quite gently and slowly. Let's give it a whirl. No, push down zooms in, opposite to what I expected. Let's do a nice gentle zoom on this beautiful mug here. And a nice gentle zoom out again. Yes, it could be a little easier to use, I suppose, but you get the hang of it. But the main usability failing is that you can't operate what appear to be buttons on here when you're expecting these things to do something. They're not pressure sensitive, touch sensitive. It's nice to have a colour display in here, though I do wonder how many people ever used that. Probably most people use the pop-out display, except possibly in extremely bright conditions where this one could be useful. You get stereo microphones, but they're actually a bit close to the back end of the camcorder, so they might get sort of breath sounds and stuff like that rather than the proper surround at the front. And actually I did notice that on one of the recordings I made back in the day. But at least it's stereo. It also comes with some features I doubt people used much, like it has Bluetooth, and in theory you should be able to download things from this to a Bluetooth device, but in practice it was too fiddly to set up and I doubt many people used it. Right, something else I want us to do is have a look at the microMV tape, and I'll use a microscope for this so we can have a good look inside it. So here's our microMV tape, and here's the record switch. So that's in record enable and that's in record prohibit. There are 4 screws but some of them look very nearly impossible to access. Even with my expensive, very small screwdriver, I'm going to struggle with these. I can get to those. They won't be a problem. But what about these? I can't get a screwdriver down there. Different screwdriver kit here. Nope, not going to get that in there either. This is a Torx driver, so it obviously won't fit, but it gives you an idea of the size that you need to get down to that extremely narrow shaft. Now that's a real shame, because I wanted to have a look at how it accesses this 64K of built-in memory, because there's no obvious contacts anywhere. I may have to be a bit brutal, because we really want to know the answer to that question, don't we? There's something here that looks like one of these knockout tabs that allows you to have a different operation, such as you get on Betacam tapes, where you can select different types. So I suspect that that was for future upgrade. But I've just had to knock it out to give myself a chance of getting the screwdriver down there. Right, that's 3 screws out. After being a little bit brutal, I was able to get the 4th one out. Let's see what we have. So I think we need to release this here, then we can open the door, and then I think it should come apart. So we see the supply spool and braking mechanism, take up spool, the top side of that. All looks quite similar to Mini DV. This is the record prevention switch. That looks very conventional, but I'm just turning it round and having a look here next to the supply spool. What's this? There's our chip. Let's have a look at our 64K chip here. I'll take it out. And we've answered our question. It's contactless. I wasn't expecting that. Okay, let's reassemble this. Okay, I've reassembled it. I hope that contact point there, that little detector, wasn't seriously important, but I've just checked a cleaning tape and it has it in there too, so it's not like it detects that it's a cleaning tape that way. It probably does so because of the chip. Let's just have a quick look at the front door mechanism, because it's quite clever. So there's a catch on one side, which when you operate it releases the door. Actually, that's similar to beta. And then these step out of the way at the back and front to allow access to the tape. So it's quite good that the way this operates is that when the tape is out of the machine and that's closed, it fully protects the back edge of the tape. Very neat. Right, so that's the microMV cassette. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this. I know I've learned something about microMV along the way. I hope you have too. I'll do plenty more content on audio and video technology in the near future. Bye for now.